first time.
Go crazy.
Did we get that?
Good answer.
Well, I'm gonna call this meeting of the Transportation and Traffic Safety Advisory Committee. Today is the 9th of May. It is 6:15. If I could request a roll call from our secretary.
Mr. Chairman, we have 3 members present. We do not have quorum. Those present are Carlos Garcia, Joe Barron, and Dave Akers. We did have 2 confirm unable to attend, but we have 2 other unexcused absences, actually a total of 3.
Okay, so let's make note of that and put it in our records. Because of the fact that we did not meet quorum, we will not be able to continue with the meeting. However, we do have visitors today. So I'm gonna ask if Mr. Frank Rosnowski can introduce himself and take control.
Okay, well, thank you for being here today. Frank Rosnowski along with Karen Gatan. We are here to kind of take you all through the last, I guess, year and a half of the city's comprehensive plan, how it started, kind of explain the process, and then from there, I'm going to take off that hat and Colin's going to put on her Bike Laredo cap, which was an advocacy group for active transportation that kind of evolved out of that comprehensive plan. So I guess you want to look at the big screen, you can pick it there, and please, during any time of the presentation, if you all have any questions, we'll do our very best to answer them.
So this is the comprehensive plan suggesting for this type of
Yes, so the comprehensive plan itself was basically adopted by the city council September 18th of last year. It took approximately a year to produce, and what we're going to talk about today is primarily chapter 4. It's a 12-chapter document, and if you haven't been to it, please, we really would love for you to go to it. You can read it online free. You can download it at vivalaredo.org. And it's interesting to note that this was adopted in 2017. Most cities of our size, and even smaller, produce a comprehensive plan every 5 years. And then they update it annually because there's things in a comprehensive plan, which is kind of an overall, it's really, I call it the broad brush stroke of where the growth of the city is. There's 12 chapters, everything from mobility to inner city revitalization, to new development, to health, to education. It's really kind of a strategic blueprint of where the city could go. It doesn't necessarily set the policies, it suggests what they could be. And so, to put it into perspective, most cities do these every 5 years. The last time the city of Laredo adopted their plan, or had done one, was 1991. So, those of us that are as old as I am know how much we've grown since 1991, and we have, but we didn't have that formal blueprint on how we developed as a city. We have developed, we've exploded. But this kind of pulls it back and kind of gives us an overview of, and so then as administrations change and even councils change, there's still kind of an overriding idea of how the city can grow. So that's what this comp plan was. And the beauty of this particular comprehensive plan was over the year that we started to when it was adopted, we had a lot of community input. In fact, we had a 10-day public workshop that was held at the public library. We had focus groups, we had town hall meetings, we had a very large media campaign. And the beauty of this plan is that it wasn't designed from the top down, like this is what we think we need. We went to the community and asked, what do you want to see in your city? What do you see in other cities that we don't have, and what would you like to be kind of when you grow up? So we had really a very, very large community effort, and that really took ownership of this document and the process that it took. Over that period, we had we actually sat down with 2,100 people, and based on and also on our websites and our online surveys, we reached 33,000 people over that course of that time. And we're not going to talk about the whole comprehensive plan, but we are going to talk about some of the things that we learned that led us on this journey of looking at an active transportation system, or as we refer to as Complete the Streets, which we'll talk a little bit about in a second. Just basic raw data. Okay, we're going to be 500,000 people 2050. So in about 20 years, we're gonna double our population. That's coming to us from the US Census track. We also had our traffic engineers conduct a study, and if you look on the slide on the left, we're looking at 2008, that's basically from 2008 till today, that's our current roadway system or major thoroughfares. Everything you see in red basically indicates highly congested areas where we're having a lot of stoppage. And you can see a lot of that in the south, of course, with the extension of the whole development of the I-83 corridor. You can see where they're coming in, the hot spots. So they did that model and they projected to 2040. As much as we're gonna grow our arteries, and we know that we can only grow in certain directions because of the nature of where we live on the border of Mexico, we cannot build our way out of congestion. It's coming. And so the opportunity here is, well, what other alternatives are there other than just build more roads and have more congestion? And this is something else we found out, which kind of, I was surprised at. When we think of congestion in Austin or San Antonio, which right now they're talking about, if we did this 20 years ago, it would, what they're trying to do now is fix what they should have done 20 years ago. We're not there yet, but we're not close, we're not far behind. Our mean travel to work right now is right up there with all those cities. And of course, we know this also. It's really over 90% of our commuters drive to work in a car, and most of them single cars. So again, these are just statistics. This is the data and evidence that was produced that we presented as well. And this is not a surprise that we have the least number of bike commuters in the country of a city of 300,000 people or 255,000 people. But this was an alarming factor that really was brought to our attention. Because of our average income in our city, which is about $33,000, the Laredo families pay 33% of their household income itself just to driving. That's their mobility costs. The national average is 14 to 15%. So what we're doing in Laredo is we're taxing the poorest of our community, and we're forcing them to have to be in a car. And to run that car, we're taking a third of their salary away. What does that third mean? That third means health. That means healthy food choices, healthcare, maybe sending your kid to college, and these are statistics that came to us. This is the evidence that was brought up to us. Also, during these charrettes, we met with a lot of young people, and I'm talking about, I hate to use Karen as the model, but her generation, the millennials. And we had meetings just with the young people, and they were saying, we don't necessarily want to have to be, we don't want to be forced to have a car. If you want to have a car, that's great. But we don't want to have one car or two cars. We'd rather be on our feet, we want to take public transportation, we want to get on a bike, we want to feel safe in our city. These are the things that were brought to us, and we were kind of challenged by the young people of the city, and we want to keep those people here in Laredo. We talk about the brain drain that we have. That goes into the overall comprehensive plan, and you can read a lot more about it, but we're going to, like I said, focus on mobility. Aside from the social equality issue, let's talk about health. We all know where we are, and we even make headlines about that. Basically, just a couple of surveys that were conducted recently. Out of 85 cities, we ranked last in fittest city in America. We ranked 99 out of 100 cities for having an active lifestyle, and our health department gave us these statistics. No surprise, we have a very high rate of obesity as well as diabetes, and there is a health and wellness component to getting people in an active transportation system. So we're going to talk a little bit about complete the streets. This is a term that is basically the idea that a street is Complete the streets is a term that, when we talk about a city's right-of-way, we're talking about, we think, well, right-of-way it's a road for cars. And what the complete streets is about is looking at that again, both in new urban development as well as existing, and make the streets for everybody. Safe places for people to walk or run. If somebody wants to get on a bicycle to feel protected. And to work with mass transit, because they all work together. And these are the other options that we can offer our citizens if we work collectively together on putting together a good plan. So we talk about obesity and us going on a diet. Well, the other diet that we're going to briefly talk about that you might have heard of is a road diet. And so the complete the streets are just what we talked about, to look at a street with the proper methodology the proper public input and the proper data and evidence that says this will work here. And I'll just briefly take you through that process. This process was developed not by Laredoans, it was developed by the Federal Highway Department of Transportation, and it basically is sent down through TxDOT. And again, the idea of designing our interior city roadways with the dimensional requirements of a highway system, which a lot of our streets in Laredo are. A lot of our streets are designed for I-35 travel, what's the proper term, engineers? The travel, whatever the...
Thoroughfare.
Yeah, thoroughfares. I mean, they're designed, you know, when we looked at the San Bernardo before the road diet, that was designed for vehicles that go 75 miles an hour in San Bernardo. And so that's what the Federal Highway Administration has been looking at lately and asking cities to reconsider. That we can no longer be designing our interior arterials as federal highways. And so this is that word, road diet. This is what a road diet is. Engineers call it a reduction or rechannelization. It's a technique, and you can read this, I mean, I know I can read for you, but basically it's a way of systematically improving the street by sharing the road. And of course, if you look at the before, and you see 2 lanes and 2 lanes, and then you look at the after, and you're like, wait a minute, you just took a whole lane away from the north and the southbound direction. What are you doing? You're crazy. You're gonna congest traffic, you're going to make it less safe, and I'm just going to take you through a little process of why the argument is that it is a safer way of actually looking at your city streets, if they fit the criteria to be done. They're not for every street, you have to go through the process. And for an example, this is Laredo's first road diet. I mean, I'm sure you've heard about it, I don't know if you've been on it, I don't know how you feel about it, you might like it, you may not like it. But we're just going to give you some of the data and evidence that we obtained while we worked on this one on San Bernardo. So that's exactly what we did. If you look at the diagram on the upper left, you'll see that's exactly San Bernardo. You still have your parking, then you have a buffered bike lane, then you'll have that northbound traffic and that southbound traffic, and then right in the middle, that's a continuous turning lane. That took a right-of-way of nothing but asphalt for streets, and you've incorporated you kept the parking, you kept the traffic moving, but you've incorporated a bike lane. And that was done on San Bernardo.
Frank, this image in the middle is heading west, I mean, it's heading
South,
south.
yes.
As you can tell, it doesn't have a parking, is there parking on both sides?
Yes, so, yeah, there's 2 parts of San Bernardo. Yeah, that is when you get, so that
Or
is
this
south.
is the Civic Center.
Yeah, that is south of the Civic Center, exactly. So, I think we have, Robert's gonna help me with this, I think we have a 70-foot right-of-way when we widen out to, what's the street when we widen it?
Is it Alamo?
Alamo. When you get to Alamo, you get that full road back.
It gets this.
Below Alamo,
Yeah.
you go to, I don't know what it is, maybe it's a 50 or 45 right-of-way. It's okay, but also what's also there, when we went to that section, there is not parking allowed. So it allows still the bike lane, and it allowed the traditional lane, but because there was no parking there, it still allowed for a bike lane. And then in areas where it doesn't allow for either, you just share the lane, you just stamp it and then it's a shared lane, that's how it works. So to take you through road diets and crashes, there's 3 types of crashes that you can eliminate or you certainly can reduce by going on that road diet. The first one is pretty straightforward. If you look at the slide on the left, what's happening is the lane on the left is the fast lane, right? That's the one you jump into and you're hauling down the road because that's where you go fast. Well, guess what? If you're not looking properly and that red car decides to make a left, it has to make a left, stop in the fast lane. That's where you get your rear end collisions. By going to the road diet, that car safely moves to that middle lane. Of course, making sure there's not an oncoming car, and we've all experienced that too, right, that craziness. But basically you get out of that lane, so you're always gonna have a continuous movement in the right lane, which is going to be safer than forcing a stop car in the left lane. That's one, so there's rear enders. The second one is when that same car is stopped and that car coming behind it at a high speed starts to realize it stops and jockeys into the right lane, again, there's your option, there's an opportunity for side swiping. And the last one is when you have that car turning from the other lane as this car is approaching, you create a blind spot. And this could be a really messy one. This could easily become a 3-car accident just by the nature of doing that. The other thing is, like I mentioned earlier, when San Bernardo was designed to go 75 miles an hour, that means we're having high traffic, obviously high speed, people are getting where they want to go faster for sure. But is that what we want in our cities? And this statistic's important because from a pedestrian standpoint, or even a cyclist, just looking at those speeds and looking at the fatality rate should be saying a lot about public safety. Right there. These are statistics. This is not, and so slowing down the traffic a little bit is a lot safer for everybody. Particularly if, you're unprotected, getting hit by an 8,000-pound vehicle. So this again is coming from the Federal Highway Administration. You can see the crash reduction rates that are telling us this is what they're coming out to. They're more pedestrian friendly. It's an opportunity where appropriate to install bike lanes if it's properly laid out. We're talking about crash. It is more of a community effort where you're bringing people back to the streets instead of keeping it on. And there's a whole bunch of economic information out there on how these increase businesses. More people that are riding, slowing down, or looking around. Hey, I didn't see that restaurant over there. Let me stop in here. This is all part of an economic. There's an economic development component to this, which is a whole other talk. A whole other PowerPoint that we can talk about. But of course, today we're talking about safety, traffic safety, and it's really a low-cost solution because essentially in a lot of areas it's striping. We're not talking about building mediums and crazy traffic. It's striping. It's pulling off and putting on paint. The process and the methodology is to talk about it and to explain to the community that this is about public safety. It's really important that whenever you start to think about these things, and I know the traffic department's already working on some of this, it is about public engagement, bringing people to the table, explaining to what's going on. They have all the statistics on where their crash problems occur. They have all the traffic counts here. All this information is available to the traffic department. All of this takes into consideration whether or not a road diet is going to work. And you want to make sure that it's not going to, it's going to be a minimal disruption to the community. And the main thing is that you want to make sure that when you do this, the road is better than before. That you basically are leaving it in a better place. Are they effective? Once you do a road diet, you're not done. You continue to survey the situation, and that analysis will tell you whether it's successful or not. There have been road diets that have been put in place that after the analysis is completed, you know what, this wasn't a good idea, we should go back, or maybe we should tweak it. It's not that you do it, that's done. And these are the efforts that should be taken into all the different, I'm not going to go through them all, but all of the different reasons why. And then at the end really is, and also don't forget to look at that economic impact. Are you bringing more people to that community? Is it a more livable, walkable community, a healthier community? Because that's what this is about as well. I know we tend on, and believe me, I'm the first one, and when I get in my car, I want to get from A to B the fastest way. I think it's the fastest route, I'm blowing through everything, but again, we live in a community, and we're being asked by our younger generation to slow down a little bit, and let's, make this an opportunity for everybody. There's tons of these assessment studies that you could look at in other cities, in other states. I mean, California, Iowa, and Washington, they looked at their whole states, they looked at all these different sites, and look at the data that's coming back. 47% reduction in Iowa, 19 in California, because they drive like crazy there, of course, it's California. And then they look at all these different areas. These statistics are on the Federal Highway Administration sites, and again, the Laredo Traffic Department will be conducting these studies and forwarding this information to TxDOT, and then TxDOT will be performing these studies as well. So there's always kind of a touch in place of not only our city, but how we're faring in our state and how we're faring in the rest of the country. The Highway Administration really wants this kind of information to come back nationally, so we can learn from it. So,
Sir, quick question.
Yes, sir.
Quick question.
Yes,
On the studies, right? California,
yeah,
Washington.
And stuff.
yeah.
I don't, the city the study's being based on the size of the city or the congestion? Laredo's very hot. Laredo's very hot.
Yes,
The traffic that we have here is crazy. 9-row trailers, 18-wheelers and
of course.
stuff. Well, was that part of that study? Or was this just vehicle, the size of it, or?
No, I think it's where, well, no, because right here, we're just talking about road diets. They're looking at where, it's really gonna be up to our city where we do them, or how we do them, or if we do them. They're just saying wherever you've done a road study in your city or your state or your town, wherever you've done one, what's your before data and what's your after data. So they're just collecting this on the premise of a road diet, which, I mean, is really happening it's happening all over the world, but really in this country, because really what we did was, once our country as a whole in the 50s, started developing the interstate, that's when dimensions of everything just started getting wider and wider and wider. Of course, vehicles are gotten bigger and all these different things, but I think what the Federal Highway Administration is telling us is, guys, you shouldn't be designing your city streets the way we're designing the Federal Highway Administration interstate. That's kind of what's happened. I live in North Laredo. I live on roads that are like, it's one lane and it's, 25, 30 feet wide? There's just areas that, and it's like, that comes back to our land development code, that comes back to our suburban model that we've been following, on us and everywhere, not just us, but everywhere. So that's really these statistics were just on road diets. So,
I'll follow up on his question, because I think the question is, currently, the only road diet that you've tested in the city has been San Bernardo, correct?
yes,
There is not one on Mines Road, because I know that
No.
at one point they were telling me that there were bike lanes on Mines Road.
there are bikers on the Mines Road, but there are
Well,
bike lanes.
okay,
Yeah.
that's my question, because if we plan to do these type of road diets, the type of road, the congestion or the traffic that is on these roads needs to be put into consideration.
Of course.
Because San Bernardo, if you had 18-wheelers going, would it be reasonable to have a one lane going one way with a bicyclist on one side and then that turning lane?
Right.
So obviously that's something we
It
need to
depends on the
consider.
street.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
depends on the street. The other thing I wanted to ask, even though you said that you had communities get together, you try explaining what this is, because I went on that street, I didn't realize that you had converted it to that area.
Well,
So I was going down that middle
I
one,
didn't do it.
thinking, no, I'm saying, I meant to say,
We're talking about San Bernardo now?
San Bernardo, I'm talking about San
Oh, you
Bernardo.
were down the middle lane?
Yeah, I went down not knowing that, oh, wait a minute, I'm
I'm
on
on
a
a turning
turning
lane.
lane, yeah, I'm like, okay, I didn't realize I needed to be, okay, yes,
Yeah.
oh, recording. Well, it was a temporary lapse in judgment, but, how we notifying the
Yeah.
driver, hey, you're on a road diet, whatever. Because that turning lane, people love taking, if you have a car in front that's going slow, or you
Yeah.
think they're going slow,
Yeah.
there's people using that road
Yes.
like a,
Let me tell you something, first of all, number one, that was not a planned road diet the way that we want to do it. Let me tell you what happened.
Oh.
On that one, it was number one, TxDOT runs San Bernardo. It's not,
oh, it's not a city.
it's not a city road.
So just also remember that's business 35.
Yes.
So that's still designated as business I-35.
I-35.
So
San Bernardo, really?
Yes.
San Bernardo.
Oh, I
So,
didn't know
but that goes to the dimension or the size really, because again, as Frank was mentioning, there's a consideration for size and part of the reason, majority of the reason why it's the width it is and kind of the length it is and kind of the way it is because that's a business 35. And I'll leave it with, that's where, and I'll give it to Frank, is that it's actually under the purview of TxDOT for the majority of decision making. And so
Okay.
that's kind of where this starts, and Frank will pick up the conversation
Yeah.
because
And exactly, so what Mr. Reed's saying, so what happened was, TxDOT was resurfacing San Bernardo, and of course, we all saw that. In fact, my business, I'm on San Bernardo, my business, in fact, it's right there, that photograph, thanks to that bus. My business is right there in San Bernardo and Victoria. And so they started resurfacing it, and so we all started getting together as Bike Laredo, saying, well, let's see if they're resurfacing it and how are they gonna restripe it. And so we got to meet with them, with the city, we had a lot of help, support with the city, we had council involved, we ultimately got everybody involved. And the idea was, well, no, we're just gonna restripe it exactly the way it was, which was a lane and a lane. And so we said, well, we've just come out of this comprehensive plan, we took them through all of the efforts and the push that the city was making in terms of looking at these issues, and ultimately, they concurred because they went to the Federal Highway Administration, they went to TxDOT, and then their engineers ran their statistics, and basically that's how we got it. It's very unusual, that was not a City of Laredo project. So when you get into like, why didn't we know, it really was kind of and by the way, we had not resistance, but they were like, hey, we're closing out the project, this contractors are getting ready to strike, we don't wanna delay the project, we don't wanna incur any more costs, we wanna put this to bed, and we were like, wait. So we had a very, very small window of opportunity to get them to do it, and it really was a force of nature that everybody just kinda got together and really pushed it and got it done. And according to them, we're not slowing down traffic on San Bernardo. We might be slowing it down from a safety standpoint, we're not, San Bernardo is not congested. People are not sitting in traffic. I remember when it was done, I remember someone saying, like posting, wait till the paisanos come. Well, when the paisanos come, everything's clogged. And by the way,
San Bernardo wasn't.
even for emergency vehicles, or like, what about emergency vehicles? Emergency vehicles use that center lane when it's an emergency. That's how it works. And
That's
so,
ideal, yeah.
that's what they do, they use that center lane, so you're not gonna keep people from, now, I agree, it was like a learning curve for everybody, they're like, well, wait a minute, how do I make a right, there's a bike lane, how do I get out, there's.
Can you drive on a bike lane?
You can drive on a bike lane, of course you can, perfectly without a cyclist under it, but that's all, it's all part of it, and it is a kind of a share of the road, a vehicle, an operator of a vehicle has a responsibility, a cyclist has a responsibility. Doesn't mean like, oh, I'm here, leave me alone, I'm protected. We still have to be actively responsible.
What it does, it just makes them visible, whereas before they had to,
Yeah, go around
Yeah.
cars or
exactly,
sidewalks.
and it just gives them a space on our streets.
And they are invisible, in fact, they're known as invisible riders, and that's this next slide. So when we look at our cycling community, I think the moment most of us, including me, an avid cyclist, and Karen, on her cruiser, we think of a cyclist in that upper left. The spandex or the lycra kings and queens, and you see them on the weekend warriors on doing their rides. And that is only one aspect of our cycling community. The slide in the middle, this guy and this guy, this is who we're talking about. We're talking about the invisible riders that even I, as an active cyclist, I never saw them until I started seeing them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And they're riding, not because they like, hey, this is my cool bicycle, that I just spent $10,000 on.
It's a means of.
This is their only means of transportation. And going back to the socially equitable, it's a social issue, it's a social economic issue. They're out in those streets and they're riding unprotected. And they're also, a lot of them are riding in the streets in conjunction with the City of Laredo metro system. If you look now, every single City of Laredo bus is fitted with a 3-position bike rack, and those bike racks are filled up. This is one of the few times, you go during rush hour, those bikes are filled up, and if they can't get on those 3 positions, they have to wait for the next bus. And ultimately, it's about these guys. I've heard so many people, including me, when I was raising my boys, I'm like, I ain't letting them out in the street, how dangerous it is out there? And so, it is about cultivating a culture of being active, and there's more than just that one type of cyclist. And so, when we were on the comp plan, I'm jumping back, how we got to our active transportation system, we came with our traffic engineers and we literally rode the streets of Laredo. We met with cycling community, we met with the community, and again, I can't tell you how many young people were showing up, saying, I want a bike lane, I want to go from my house to the movie on a bike, I want to go from my house to the playground on a bike. These were things that came time and time again. And so, our engineers got together with the community and with the City of Laredo departments, and we put together a plan. Again, It wasn't just let's do a bike plan, it was let's look at the information that's coming to us. We were getting the crash locations, you can see a lot of them are downtown primarily. Pedestrian and bicycle accidents and fatalities. We were looking at that information, we were getting the traffic counts from your department right here. All of this information went in on how to map out a bike system. This is a really cool one. This is called Strava, it's a heat map. And now what cyclists do is they actually, because of technology, they map their rides, and that information goes back to Strava. And we can actually tell where people are riding their bikes. So, if I can explain this to you, you all heard of the Shiloh hike and bike trails? Have you heard of those?
Yeah.
See all that white? Those are the crazy daredevil mountain bikers there. Those are the crazy ones out there at La Bota. And then you see all this yellow. Those are our commuters. These are people riding bikes. A lot of them are those invisible riders. But they're out there and they're heating that map up. And so the more you see, the more yellow you see, the more cycling you see. The red is lightly traveled. The yellow is primarily our commuters. And then the white are the crazy, that are out there every weekend mapping their rides, trying to beat each other out, getting trophies on Strava, all that sort of thing. But this is the information. We can see where they're riding. And, we didn't need this to know this, but look at San Bernardo. Look at that. I mean, so we are now, for better or worse, whatever you feel about San Bernardo, that street has a place for a cyclist that was there already. They were probably on the sidewalk before then, or jockeying in and out of cars, and now there's a place on the road for them. And we haven't slowed down traffic.
Strava is a telematics device?
It's an application. You can
Okay.
get it free online, and you can hit it. It started as kind of a competition for competitive cyclists, and now everybody uses it for mapping their rides. Well, not everybody, but most people.